on it. Do you just, because one of the things is, and I'll talk about this poll now, right? So we did some polling here on GBNews. I can show you some of those slides now. I apologise about that previous clip. But look, 46% of those people that knew how they're going to vote at the next election apparently said that they are going to vote Labour at the next election. 18% Tories, 13% Reform, Lib Dems 10%. We're then asking questions like, who do you trust to strengthen the economy? 26% apparently said that they would trust Rachel Reeves the most to strengthen Britain's economy over the long term, compared to just 16% with Jeremy Hunt. 35% said none of the above. 23% said that they don't know. Cost of living crisis, 42% polled said the worst is still to come regarding the cost of living crisis. And also, we also asked people, when should we have an election? 37% of those polled said they wanted a general election as soon as possible. But get this, everybody, 16% of people said they're not going to vote at all, and 23% of people said they don't know who to vote for. Ben Habib, come on, what do you make to all of this?
Well, I stood in the Wellingborough by-election, which is one of the reasons I haven't been on for a long time.
I had no idea.
I was conspicuous by my absence.
Oh, right.
And, my mate Kate Hoey was supporting you, I saw.
She was, and very kind and wise of her to do so.
I'll have to have words with her then.
But the message that was driven home to me in Wellingborough, walking around the streets and talking to people, was that they are absolutely fed up with the institutions which govern them. It's not sufficient now just to vote for another party. They're absolutely fed up with both Labour and the Tories. And the real story is how many people are not voting, staying at home. And we saw that in Wellingborough, we saw that in Kingswood, we saw that even more so in Rochdale with an even lower turnout.
What were you guys even thinking in Rochdale?
What was Reform UK thinking in Rochdale in terms of...
Well, you stood Simon Danchuk,
who was sexting a 17-year-old girl.
In an area which is quite sensitive to kind of young girls, young women, whatever.
To be fair to Simon Danchuk, and I don't at all defend any form of sexual interaction between a middle-aged man and a...
Yeah, but I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about you guys, your party. What was you thinking? I'm asking you that.
I mean, Simon Danchuk was one of the first to call out the grooming gangs.
Right.
And he did so. And he was a former Labour MP of Rochdale. But that was a really bitter, filthy by-election campaign, with the biggest theme, of course, being Gaza, a foreign policy issue dominating a local election, which I think tells you more about how multiculturalism in this country simply isn't working. There was lots of saying... But the thing I want just quickly on Wellingborough is to say, when I went about my campaigning, I was almost pushing at an open door. I know I only got 13% of the vote in total, but on the day itself, I got closer to 20% because I didn't really feature in the postal votes that took place. About a third of the votes were postal votes. Right. And people want the two main parties gone. And one of the things people say is first past the post prevents people like us getting in, Reform UK. And, of course, it does. But I think we're going to get seats even through the first past the post system.
Well, let me bring Paul in. This is not a party political broadcast for Reform. Paul, go on.
Well, the Tories are clearly going to lose, aren't they? We know that. And Labour will probably win, although I suspect it's not going to be by quite the margin that some people think it's going to be. But I detect no great enthusiasm for the Labour Party. I say that as a Labour member. People are not cheering at the rafters for a Labour government. It's almost like in the Australian election in 2022. Labour was elected because they were seen as the least worst of two bad options. And I think we could see something similar in the coming election, and particularly in the red wall areas. I really think that Labour's support in the red wall areas is quite sticky. They're winning support elsewhere in the shires and the cities and so on, the fashionable cities, the university towns. Excuse me. But in terms of the old traditional Labour heartlands, the North and the Midlands, those post-industrial places that they lost so many of in 2019, and really to have any kind of sort of decent majority, they're going to need to win a substantial number of those back. I think the evidence, not necessarily just from this poll, but the general trend of polling shows that Labour is still struggling there. People are not rushing to flock back. And I say to people now that the betrayal over Brexit cannot be overestimated.
And the Labour Party doesn't stand for the working class anymore, as far as I can see, Paul.
Well, I would look. It stands more for the working class than the Tories or Reform. I'll have that debate with you.
Or Reform.
Yeah,
Our signature policy, economic policy, is to take 6 million of the working class out of the tax net.
Yeah, but at the same time, what are you going to do in terms of raising people's wages? What are you going to do about the minimum wage?
Well, we cut immigration, which undercuts their wages. The Labour Party.
What are you going to do about employment?
The Labour Party would have open borders, and that would kill the British.
How are you going to close the gap between rich and poor? Would you accept, for example, what I believe passionately, that there's far too much wealth concentrated in too few hands in this country, and we need to spread it about more, and we need to tax the rich more, and we need to put money into working class families' pockets, and we need to raise the minimum wage, and we need to give them better trade union rights, and so on and so forth.
What we cannot
I don't think you'll agree with much of that.
Well, I fundamentally disagree on continued wealth redistribution over wealth creation.
So you want the rich to get richer?
No,
you want the gap between rich and poor to get wider?
That's not what I said. It's not what I said. The problem with wealth redistribution, particularly as we've practiced it in this country, is that you eventually run out of money, and we are running out of money. National debt at an all-time high, taxation at an all-time high, and GDP per capita shrinking as it has done for the last 2 years. A country cannot go on redistributing wealth if it's getting poorer. So we have to create wealth.
So
part of the mechanism,
you wouldn't have tax at all.
Part of the mechanism for creating wealth is making it pay to work in the UK. And there are two fundamental aspects of doing that. The first is you've got to cut back.
You're arguing for the trickle-down effect.
You've got to cut back dramatically.
You're arguing for the trickle-down effect,
I'm not arguing for anything.
Which has been shown to be
what you've got to do is stop migration.
And instead
you've got to stop migration.
Instead of closing the gap between rich and poor, it shovels ever larger amounts of money into the pockets of the rich.
Don't talk over each other, because no one at home can keep up with it.
You've got to stop bringing in cheap imported labour,
I don't disagree with that.
Which undercuts the British worker.
I agree with you on that.
And you've got to allow wages to go up, and you've got to make it pay to work. So you've got to cut taxes on the working and middle class. And Labour will do neither. Labour will increase taxes on the working and middle class, and it'll have an open border policy. Keir Starmer does not stand for British citizens in this country.
Listen, I'm not going to claim that Labour is going to do those things. The point that I'm making is that we live in a society that is hideously disfigured by wealth and income inequality, and no major party, including your own, has got any desire to close the gap between rich and poor. And a country cannot be at ease with itself when it's got ever-increasing gaps between the people at the bottom end of the ladder.
I'll tell you who has got a desire to do something. Me. And that is to go to a break. You guys are going to have the final say on that conversation. Either of them convince you? Are you one of those people that still is thinking you're not going to vote? Would there be anything or anyone that would convince you to change your mind? Tell me.